Yeah, so he's run into two men, and one of them was a little skeptical of his story about his dream with the mark in the Philokalia and whatnot. And now they're having a conversation going back and forth about the rosary and about these miracles and whether or not they're real or not. And so one of the men is kind of touting and saying that there's no miracle at all. Things like that happen. It's common enough. But then his companion says, but the old man answered him thus: "Do not jump to conclusions like that, sir. You miss the deeper aspects of the incident. For my part, I see in this peasant story the mystery of nature, both sensuous and spiritual." "How's that?" asked the clerk. "Well, like this. Although you have not received the highest education, you have, of course, learned the sacred history of the Old and New Testaments, as summarized in the questions and answers used at school. You remember that when our father Adam was still in a state of holy innocence, all the animals were obedient to him. They approached him in fear and received from him their names. The old man to whom this rosary belonged was a saint. Now, what is the meaning of sanctity? For the sinner, it means nothing else than a return through effort and discipline to the state of innocence of the first man. When the soul is made holy, the body becomes holy also. The rosary had always been in the hands of a sanctified person. The effect of the contact of his hands and the exhalation of his body was to inoculate it with holy power, the power of the first man's innocence. That is the mystery of spiritual nature. All animals in natural succession down to the present time have experienced this power, and they experience it through smelling. For in all animals, the nose is the chief organ of sensation. That is the mystery of sensuous nature." "You learned people go on about strength and wisdom," said the clerk, "but we take things more simply. Fill up a glass of vodka and tip it off. That will give you strength enough." And he went over to the cupboard. "That's your business," says the schoolmaster, "but please leave the learning to us." I liked the way he spoke, and I came closer to him and said, "May I venture, Father, to tell you a little more about my starets?" And so I told him about the appearance of my starets while I was asleep, the teaching he had given me, and the charcoal mark which he had made in the Philokalia. He listened with care to what I told him. But the clerk, who lay stretched out on a bench, muttered, "It's true enough, you can lose your wits through reading the Bible too much. That's what it is. Do you suppose a boogeyman comes and marks your books at night? You simply let the book drop on the ground yourself while you were asleep, and some soot made a dirty mark on it. There's your miracle, eh? You tricksters, I've come across plenty of your kind." Muttering this sort of thing, the clerk rolled over with his face to the wall and went to sleep. So I turned to the schoolmaster, saying, "If I may, I will show you the actual book. Look, it is really marked, not just dirtied with soot." I took it out of my knapsack and showed him. "What surprises me," said I, "is how a spirit without a body could have picked up a piece of charcoal and written with it." He looked at the mark and said, "That is also a spiritual mystery. I will explain it to you. Look here now, when the spirits appear in a bodily form to a living person, they compose themselves a body which can be felt from the air and the world stuff, and later on give back to the elements again what they had borrowed from them. Just as the atmosphere possesses elasticity, a power to contract and expand, so the soul, clothed in it, can take up anything and act and write. But what is this book of yours? Let me have a look at it." He began to look at it, and it opened at the sermons of St. Simeon, the new theologian. "Ah, this must be a theological work. I have never seen it before," he said. So, so we've got a little bit of different opinions about miraculous things. Clearly, Vivekananda makes the statement rather, what would you say, a rather surprising statement that there are no miracles, that everything can be explained through the normal working order of things, but that those normal working orders of things may sometimes be outside of our common experience, but that there is explanations for all of them. And so it's an interesting idea. But this miracle mongering, it is a sidetrack for a lot of folks that get into spiritual life. If you read the writings of like Raja Yoga or even Jnana Yoga, in there, some of the more interesting spiritual gifts, reading minds, flying, being able to become really, really small, be able to be in two places at one time. These different types of spiritual gifts are often talked about, and many people experience them. I mean, Vivekananda, he's on the record in his complete works of having tested some of these sadhus in India who had some of these capabilities. He talks about the time that they went and visited this old sadhu, and they made him strip naked down to his loincloth and sit in the room fully surrounded by all of the people to watch. And they were able to tell the sadhu whatever they wanted to see. And Vivekananda said, I want you to hand me a rose that I've seen in the United States. And so literally out of nowhere, from behind his back, he pulls out this rose that still has dewdrops on the petals and hands it. Vivekananda, says there was no way that he could have faked that. We made him strip down to his loincloth and sit in the middle of the room, and he was able to do this, to show this. He was also asked to pull out a fresh piece of fruit that wasn't common to India, and he was able to do that. And so, we have Vivekananda's word that these things actually exist. I haven't seen anything like that, happen like that. But the lesson I would take from it, though, is be careful about it, because they're a distraction. They'll get you interested in those kinds of things because the ego loves those kinds of things, because the ego loves power and specialness, uniqueness about itself. And so it glums on to those ideas. And that's one of the reasons that Ramakrishna says, don't even look at those things. Don't pay any attention to them whatsoever, because they pull you off into a whirlpool where you can get stuck for a long time before you get back on the path again. So he warns us about miracle mongering, as it were. So I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen anything like that. I certainly have not done anything like that. And I think I'd probably be more like Vivekananda. I'd run out of the room screaming if I actually saw something like that. Although I watch David Blaine on YouTube sometimes, and I have to say, his street magic had me questioning reality. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, some of those things that he does. But he admits, that they're tricks or that they're illusions. But even knowing that they're illusions, I can't see how you could possibly explain them away. It's amazing stuff. So anyway, it's a non sequitur. Don't pay attention to them. Don't seek them. Don't worry about them. Believe in them if you want to. Don't believe in them if you don't want to. They have no bearing on your relationship with the divine and with your knowledge of the beloved. So he's got this book. He wants to take a look at it. He hasn't seen it before. Book and theology. This must be a theological work. I've never seen it before, he said. It is almost wholly made up, I told him, of teaching on the interior prayer of the heart in the name of Jesus Christ. It is set forth here in full detail by 25 Holy Fathers. Ah, I know something of interior prayer, he answered. I bowed down before him, down to the very ground, and begged him to speak to me about interior prayer. Well, it says in the New Testament that man and all creation are subject to vanity, not willingly. and sigh with effort and desire to enter into the liberty of the children of God. The mysterious sighing of creation, the innate aspiration of every soul toward God, that is exactly what interior prayer is. There is no need to learn it. It is innate in every one of us. What a beautiful, beautiful notion, that it is because of our oneness with the divine that we feel a longing to end the separation. You know, we at a very subtle level are aware of that unity. You know, we mentioned in this morning's class, some of the things, and I've mentioned them before, some of the impossible things that we know or can conceive of that we should not know or should not be able to conceive of. You know, like the first one that I think of is immortality. Where can the material world have taught us anything of immortality? And yet it's a concept that we have in our mind, a concept that we actually understand. And so the idea of infinity, there's nothing infinite in the created world. All things have boundaries. And yet we know and work with this concept of infinity with no problem at all. Any ideal that we have, any sense of perfection, we've never seen anything presented to us in perfection in the modern world or in the material world. And yet we have this constant ongoing idea of a perfection, of an ideal. So these are things that are printed upon our I don't know what samskaras, you know, from a time perhaps before our separation, if there was such a thing, you know, or of a time with the beloved, maybe between lives, or who knows? I have no idea about any of that. But it is interesting to me that we have some of these ideas that we could not have learned through the senses and through the material world. Ideas that if our mind really was just about what's been put into it through the senses, we would not know or even have conceived of such a thing. And so it's always interesting to me to think about that, because one of Vivekananda's disciples talks about faith in that way. He says faith is this intuitive recollection of an eternal relationship that we somehow have this faint memory of. You know, and so faith is to believe in these things that can't be demonstrated or are not demonstrated in the physical world, but are truths, like our immortal soul, like our unity, the unity of all things, like perfection and ideal. All of these things that we there's no way that we could prove or disprove them in the material world. And yet conceptually, we've brought them into the world with us. And he says that that's the definition of faith, believing these things, not for no reason, but because there can be no reason. There can be no demonstration of them because their existence is not manifested in the material world. And yet our knowing them is the evidence that they must exist somewhere or somehow. So this man says that he has something that this whole notion of interior prayer, this longing of the soul for reunion with the beloved, that it's innate in every single one of us, which is exactly what we're reading in our Buddhist class. You know, that this search for enlightenment is kind of in a sense, it's an insanity, because that enlightenment is always ours, always has been ours, will always be ours. It is a return to our isness, to our nature. It's a leaving behind of a hypnotism and ignorance. And so it's an uncovering, it's not an adding to ourself. And so your relationship with the divine is not a matter of accruing and gathering. It's a matter of removing the dirt, removing the dust and forgetfulness, so that you can come back into contact with what has always been, so that you can see that you and God are intimate, that you can understand that you and the beloved have always been intimate and closer to each other than you and your neck, the scriptures say. And so that our sitting and doing our practice is not for an accumulation or an acquisition. It's for enjoying a present reality. You are enlightened. You are free. You are beloved of the divine. You are intimate with God. And that our practice is not a quest for that, but an enjoyment of that. And so we sit down and we uncover so that we can enjoy God rather than going and looking for something that we don't have. So he says, there is no need to learn it. It is innate in every one of us. But what is one to do to find it in oneself, to feel it in one's heart, to acknowledge it by one's will, to take it and feel the happiness and light of it, and so to reach salvation, I asked. So this is the point of spiritual life. This is why we do our practice, is so that we can answer this question. I don't know whether there is anything on the subject in theological books, said he. Well, here it is. It is all explained here, I answered, showing him my book again. The schoolmaster noted the title and said he would certainly have one sent from Tobolsk and study it. After that, we went on our different ways. I thanked God for this talk with the schoolmaster and prayed that God would so order things that the clerk might read the Philokalia, even if only once, and let him find salvation through it. Another time, it was in the spring, I passed through a village where I stayed with the priest. He was a worthy man living alone, and I spent 3 days with him. Having watched me for that length of time, he said to me, "Stay here. I will pay you something. I need a trustworthy man. As you see, we are starting to build a stone church here near the old wooden chapel, and I have been looking for some honest person to keep an eye on the workmen and to stay in the chapel in charge of the offerings for the building fund. It is exactly the thing for you and would just suit your way of life. You will be alone in the chapel to say your prayers. There is a quiet little room for a verger there. Please stay, at any rate, until the building is finished." For a long while, I refused. But in the end, I had to yield to the good priest's begging, and I stayed there till the autumn, taking up my abode in the chapel. At first, I found it quiet and apt for prayer, although a great many people came to the chapel, especially on holidays, some to say their prayers and some because they were bored, and others again with the idea of pilfering from the collection plate. I read my Bible and my Philokalia every evening, and some of them saw this and started talking to me about it, or asked me to read aloud. After a while, I noticed that a young village girl often came to the chapel and spent a long while in prayer. Listening to her whisperings, I found that the prayers she was saying were some of them strange to me, and others the usual prayers in a garbled form. I asked her where she learned such things, and she told me it was from her mother, who was a churchwoman, but that her father belonged to a sect which had no priesthood. Feeling sorry for her, I advised her to read her prayers in the right form as given in the tradition of the Holy Church. Then I taught her the right wording of the Lord's Prayer and of Hail Mary, and finally I advised her to say the prayer of Jesus as often as she could, for that brought one nearer to God than any other prayer. The girl took note of what I said and said about it quite simply. And what happened? A short time afterwards, she told me that she was so used to the prayer that she felt it draw her all the time, that she used it as much as she could, and that she enjoyed the prayer at the time, and that afterward she was filled with gladness and a wish to begin using it again. I was glad of this, and I advised her to go on with it more and more. He's describing here, you see how his life just keeps unfolding, one chapter after another, without his planning, without his setting out a will, or without his determining a direction. He's living the life of a real sadhu, of a real wandering monk, where you leave all of that to God, to the beloved. You don't make plans about your future. You don't set out and say, this is how it's going to go and this is what we're going to do. You simply take each moment as it comes, and you just keep offering everything that you think you want or desire or think. You just keep offering it to the divine. And Mother does open these opportunities for you. She will bring people to you that need your help. She'll bring folks to you who have questions that you can answer for them, or problems in their life that you could be a strength and a help to. You don't need to go looking. You certainly can. There's not a prohibition about it. But this notion of faithful living, of really knowing, that Mother is intimately aware of your life and will in fact carry it forward if you give it to her. And I say if you give it to her, because if you don't give it to her, she may still do it, but you'll never know it because you'll blame yourself for it. Your ego will jump in there and say, I did that and I did it really well. But this is something very pertinent to me in my experience right now, in leaving that monastery and coming out on my own here, really just from an inner sense that I don't know, that it was time. And getting here and having only $79 and just having everything turn out. And I it's been a huge blossoming of faith for me. Because I have been able to pay all of the bills and take care of everything that's been necessary to take care of, and my account balance, my checking account balance, is the same as when I got here. Like the money is just not diminishing; it's just being taken care of. Of course, all of it I can explain where it's coming from, but the fact that it's coming, that I have not had to go to work, because I was quite certain when I got here that I was going to have to go find a job. And after my vows and whatnot, I just was really struggling with how would I do that and still be a monk, still be faithful. And that was my prayer to Mother, is my prayer to Mother. It's like, how do you live outside of a monastery as a monk? And, this turning to prayer and this not making plans and this laying everything at Mother's feet and not letting myself sit and think about what I should do in order to build a Vedanta center, or what I should do to reach people, or how should all of this happen? But to just really and honestly leave it to the divine, let Mother take care of it. And, I can unequivocally say that I have never seen or experienced anything like my life in the last 7 months. I've never seen anything like it. I've always been too afraid to actually take that chance and take that risk. And now that that's been demonstrated to me, there's this, the ego is horrified at it. Because the ego wants to take care of everything, and it still constantly tries to make me feel horribly insecure, like I need to go get a job. And I remember I had a prayer not too many weeks ago where I was telling Mother, I was like, I know that things just keep showing up, that things that need to be done, solutions keep showing themselves. I said, but I'm still very insecure. I said, when I'm working a job, I know that on the second week of every month I get my paycheck. And so I feel a security in that. And I said, in this way of life with you right now, Ma, it's not like that. It's nice that things turn up, but it's not on a date, and it's not anything that I feel like. And I tell you that I got such a mental scolding for that. Mother was like, what are you saying? She said, how is it that you can trust a job that I gave you to give you a check that I'm giving you, but you can't accept one directly from me? You can't feel comfortable with things coming directly from me. You need some intercessor that you can blame it on. She said, what is that? What am I to you? How can you possibly say that to me? And I felt so chided in that, and again, it's not like I'm not claiming supernatural voices, or even any voices for that matter. It's just that inner awareness that that I'm speaking to, of when you have those prayers and there seems to be responses, and sayings that I blame on the mother. I blame on the presence of Ma, but I'm not going to go to court for it. It's just the way that it is. And so for us, to really take a chance in your life of trusting the divine, really take it into account when Jesus says, not even a leaf falls to the ground, but by the will of God. Or when he says, look at the lilies of the field, the birds of the air, that God takes care of all of their needs. And he says, will he not take care of yours? You're the partner of the beloved, the child of the mother. And so, hold on to that notion. It may not be, I've had many conversations with Mother where I've become aware of the fact that to trust Mother means that you trust that she's going to do what's best for you. And it might be best for you to live under a bridge for a while. It's like, you can't write that off. That may be Mother's plan. It's not that she didn't have a plan and now you live under a bridge. It's that living under a bridge is what's best for you at the moment, and you have to find the gumption to accept that, and to take that. It's like, okay, if that's where you want me to be, I will be there. And the fact is in this moment that you live in, if you can be content in this moment, you can be content in any moment, regardless of conditions, because this moment is your relationship with the beloved. And the joy that we get from this this internal fellowship, that's such a Christian word, but this internal communion with the divine is not because of any external conditions. So you may very well be under a bridge, but you'll be the happiest man or woman to ever live under a bridge. You'll be content living where you are. You'll be content as you are. You look at all the saints that way. When I was walking in the Himalayas, that was the amazing thing that I saw these sadhus who live in the caves up there and just do practice. And I think I mentioned this once before, that outside the cave doors were like these 12-foot high little, what do you call that stuff? Fiberglass flags. And when I got back down to town, I asked, I was like, why are all those flags, on 14-foot poles outside of these sadhus' homes, caves? And the person told me, he says, well, it's the people from the village that feed all of those sadhus that go up there and give offerings. And in the winter, there can be up to 12 or 14 feet of snow. Their caves are completely buried in snow. And the townspeople don't know where to leave the food. And so they've devised this means of putting these flags up so that they know where to leave the food for the sadhus to get their food. And I thought, what an amazing thing from so many different angles. One, you've got these sadhus buried 14 feet in snow, living in caves, with no heat, no anything. As a matter of fact, there's a YouTube video of that's taken. I just saw it about a month ago. I didn't mark it. I bet I can find it though, where these soldiers are doing a what do you call that? A border walk, of the Kashmiri border there. And they come up, they're in the Himalayas. It's snowing super hard. The wind is whipping. These soldiers are decked in jackets and scarves and furs. And they come along and they come over this ridge, and walking toward them is a sadhu, a wandering monk with his matted hair, wearing nothing but a loincloth, holding a staff in his hand, walking barefooted in this snow. He's not shivering. He's not cold. His face is just beaming with a joy, and he comes up and just greets these men with such a love, like, oh, it's so good to see you, oh, and talks with them. And he's standing there almost naked in the top of the Himalayas, in bare feet in the snow, blissed out. And all these shoulders with all their packs, it's like you can just see the bondage of the world versus the freedom of the soul, right there. It's like these men had to carry their packs of food and burdens on their back. They have to wear these heavy furs and boots and clothes. just to hike up to this mountain, and here's this child of the mother walking barefooted with a staff in his hand, his hair rolled up on his head in the snow, beaming, just delighted to see human beings, but thinking nothing of the fact that he's in a snowstorm in the Himalayas with nothing. You know, where are we? That is our nature, to live that kind of life of faith, that kind of friendship with God, that kind of knowledge that this world is an illusion. And because of that, we're utterly free, that we are not bound by the laws and rules of this world if we allow them to our mind to transcend these things, if we allow faith to take us beyond the limits of our samskaras, of what we believe to be or think to be true of this material world. To take a risk. I mean, take a risk. It's hard to know how to take that risk, because you don't know how mother's going to answer. But taking the risk means to accept the answer as the right answer, and to accept the answer as the best answer, in that sense. So, Nicole, you look like you're dying to say something.
I'm trying, because the words are trying to come out. I'm so horrible. Okay. So I've been thinking, like, okay, this world is an illusion to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have material world here. It's an illusion to us because we're I can't say where we are, but we're everywhere. But like, okay, like a pendulum, we have awareness and source and center, which is where we are looking out of this. But we go backwards through the mind and into deep sleep, and then we're sitting at that fourth state. But like a pendulum, that would be a stopping point. There's got to be a come out point. Like, so we leave this body and we go to heaven or whatever. You take another form. So that's another manifest world in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's illusory to the Atman. It's illusory to Brahman. It's illusory to our true nature. But it's still here, and God keeps coming back here, because they say, okay, so the incarnation comes with its family, comes with its Trinity. And I just read in the words of Christ this morning that no one, well, something along the lines of, you basically won't be allowed, you can call on him, but only by the will of the Father will he answer you, or will you be allowed to be one with him. And that struck me as strange, because I thought he came for everyone. So I'm not going to cherry pick Christ's words, but it made me think about just the incarnations period. If this is illusory, and I feel like we're kind of sitting in heaven, but the illusion is that we're right here. When you go to sleep, you go somewhere. Feels like you're in the lap of God when you go to sleep, which is why when you wake up, you're energized and you got everything figured out. But it's like a pendulum swing. I feel like we're really backpacking on Baba's back and dreaming and projecting this. We're going to play outside for a little while, and we're living inside all the while. But that would break reality. There's another side. There's got to be another side, or it's just in consciousness, like space, and it manifests at God's will. I don't know. It's just hearing the word illusion, and just like the state of mind. This is so funny, but we were driving today, and I swear I saw and in Louisiana, you're not going to see where I'm at. You won't see this. A bunch of Buddhist monks on the bayou. My mind saw that, and I was like, Mom, Buddhist monks on the bayou, what? And she's like, there's no way. When we get to the other side of the bridge, I look behind me. It's actually some graduates who are graduating high school, and they've got the same colors. They've got the deep red with the orange outline. And so I laughed so hard. I was like, okay, this is all about the state of mind. What state of mind you're in is going to project what you see on the outside. But still, it's all coming from inside. So it is a play. and God's playing, and we're playing like together in this beautiful dance, or a horrible dance, or no dance at all. But I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah.
Yeah, that's the nature of these conversations. Yeah, no, excellent points in there, and all of them are relatively true. All of your conclusions there. It's interesting because Ramakrishna really is the one who speaks to this, because it's Shankaracharya who said that the world is an illusion, right? And Ramakrishna adjusts that a little bit. He doesn't disagree with it, but he makes an adjustment. He says, what is an illusion is what we think we're seeing, what we think we're experiencing. But there is something there. It's like the white screen behind the movie. The movie is an illusion. The story is an illusion. All of the events of it are an illusion. But the light, the projector, and the screen are the reality. There is something there. But while you're watching the movie, you're not aware of the white screen or the flickering projector. You're just aware of the story. And so the illusion that the saints or sages are talking about is that, God is all that we see. God is everywhere present and always perfect. But the story that we're playing on the projection of our mind, on the screen of mind, the light is a consciousness. And the story is what's being reflected by that consciousness off of the mind to the soul, to the self. And so the way that we interpret that story, what we believe that story is about, that is the illusion. It's like when you dream at night, whatever dream you're having is an illusion, but the mind producing it is real. And so what we're trying to do is become aware of the white screen as we're watching the movie. That's dispassion. Is when you don't get caught up in the story. You watch it, you see it, you acknowledge it, but you don't buy into it. You don't identify with it, right? The reason you cry with the woman breaking up with her husband in the movie is because you are attached to her dilemma and you are identifying, which means that you are remembering some of your own painful stories and identifying with this woman's situation and crying along in sympathy with her in the movie. But what we want to do is to sit there with detachment, which means that we know that we're sitting in a theater. We know that this is a movie on a white screen. And so we maintain our equanimity of self. We don't get pulled into the illusion so that we're not hypnotized by the story. And so that hypnotization is what is the illusion for us. And that's what our practices are trying to break. The idea with the mantra is to break that. That's supposed to be a constant reminder of the white screen. The Jesus prayer would be the same thing, that we're trying to break that hypnotization that has drawn us into believing that the mind is us talking to ourselves, when in fact the mind is just a wheel of samsara rolling down the hill based on the past and has nothing to do with us as a self. Has nothing to do with us at all. And that it will carry on doing its thing, whether or not we identify with it. We just will cease to suffer with it. Does that help at all, or talk to anything you were thinking? Or was I in another place?
No, it all does, because it's like, when she wrote, once it's like, so we're the light, God pushes the button, the mind is the negatives, and the screen is this world, this life that we see, the movie taking place. Like, you take the whole thing in a picture, we're the light, the button pusher to make it happen is God. The negatives is the samskaras in the mind, and it projects out onto that screen. Is that not an accurate depiction? The screen is us?
No, the screen, we are the observer in the movie theater, just like we are in life. But the true nature of that observer is God, right? Consciousness is the light, right? The screen is the mind, and the story is our samskaras. What our samskaras, we have to remember the previous frames in order to maintain the story that's being alluded to on the screen. That's your samskaras. So they create the story, they maintain the story, right? But you are the observer along with all the other ones in the theater. So you are not personally involved with the story of the movie, although you have that illusion that this is a personal event, but it's not. But in all of it is God. All of the separations are part of our ignorance. The truth of the matter is that there's no movie, there's no screen, there's no light, there's only one without a second. It doesn't have any parts to it at all. It cannot be divided. But that is a mystery that our mind, that our brain cannot process, which is why they call it transcendent, right? And the reason that our brain can't process it is it's twofold. One is the brain always needs those three components, subject-object relationship, in order to conceive of something. When you have one without a second, there's not a triad. The mind cannot conceive of it. It just doesn't obey the rules. The mind can't even work with it. That's one. The second thing is that the mind projects certain tools that distort our perception, like time, space, causation. Those three things belong to the tool, to the mind. So anything that it grabs, it's going to apply time, space, causation to them. And that causes us to have this illusion of living a life and time passing and things changing and this, that, and the other. But that is part of the mind and not what the mind is seeing. So in that sense, that's the reason that we have to go beyond mind. That's the reason we have to silence mind, is to become aware of these things that the mind cannot deliver to us. And so until we come to that, until we know that and figure that out, which is hard because we habitually go to the mind for everything, the mind or the body. We go to one of the two for everything. You want to know how you feel in the morning, the first thing you do is go to the body. Oh, I'm tired. The first thing you go when you see everybody sitting around the breakfast table, you query the mind. Oh, I'm in a bad mood, or I'm in a good mood. And we're always querying something outside of ourself to find out about ourself. And that's the delusion. That's what gets us messed up. You are what you are when there's no noise in the mind, no calculations or analysis happening in the mind, nobody telling you anything about yourself. And it's when we come to that place, when we are able to silence the mind, able to detach from the story, able to pull ourselves completely out from the illusion, that we then become aware of who we are, that we are divine, infinite, immortal, ever free, ever pure, and ever blissful. But we can't see those things when we're distracted by the film, distracted by the movie. It may be our birthday, but if we're at a horror movie, we're forgetting about our birthday and screaming our heads off in terror at the sight of the alien coming out of the guy's stomach, And so that's really what life does to us. We are in a brilliant mood. It's our birthday always, forever. Everything is fantastic, but we forget it because we're in the horror movie and we're dragged into the story and we suffer according to our delusion, according to our ignorance. And so all of our practices.
So Maharaj,
yes.
No, just so that I understand it well. So you are saying the mind being the screen, once we silence that or just completely destroy it, according to the scriptures or whatever, manoligraham, that is killing the mind. So the samskaras, which are the pictures that come in there, cannot get projected, right? So it ends there, and that is what we are aiming for, right?
Yes. And I know the scriptures, that there are places in the scripture where it says destroying mind. What they're talking about when they're doing that, when they say that, is the active mind, quieting the active mind. The mind can't be destroyed. And I say that simply because Thakur says that pure mind and Brahman are the same. So if you're going to actually destroy mind, you're going to be destroying Brahman, which will run us into a little bit of theological trouble. So we don't destroy the mind. What we do is we destroy the mind's power over us. We destroy the mind's influence over us. And we do that by disassociating, or by not being interested in all of its stories, not collecting its bits and pieces as being descriptions of ourself. We don't identify with them. We don't take the things that the mind likes and say, I like them. We don't take the things that the body doesn't like and say, I don't like them. We keep it third party. The body doesn't like cold. The mind wants more sleep. You know, that's why Thakur, he never said the word I, never referred to himself that way. He always said this place or this pillowcase when he was talking about the body. So he never let himself forget that he was not these things. Now, that's only necessary until illumination, and at illumination, the time of illumination, you realize that you are all things. You know, that all things are you. But in order to get there, you have to disassociate from the particular, so that you can see at some point the universal, right? The mind cannot hold it. Yes, Nicole.
All of that right there. Okay, so in Vedanta, we're taught that we are Brahman. Okay, I'm looking back, realizing it seems like I've always been looking for someone or something. It's just this thing in awareness where, like, now that my husband's gone, I realized that when I go out, there's something in me that's looking for someone or something, and I thought maybe it was him. And then I looked back and said, no, this has been this way. I'm looking for God. It's a hide and seek game. Is the intent to find that and find the self? Is that what's going, like, in when you look at it? It's if you are everything and you are Brahman, it's like a hide and seek game. And you see that everywhere. It's the self finding the self.
Yes.
It's
everything you're attracted to is a name of God. Everything that you desire contains a name of God that you are confusing with the object itself. But what it's doing is reflecting a part of your nature directly to you in a pure way. For whatever reason, that particular object is able to reflect very directly to you a name of God. And so you get confused and think it's the object that you want, but it's the reminder of the name of God that is causing the bliss within you, causing the joy within you. So yes, it's a game of hide and seek, but there aren't two people playing. It's just you. You know, you in your true form is the same you that's in me. So there's only one of us, and we're all playing in this together, but we are all the same being. We are all the same universal love, universal wisdom, and isness. That's the same thing. If all of us could meditate deeply, just as a metaphor, if we could all close our eyes right now and turn around 180 degrees and take a big step into the depths of our mind, we would all bump into each other.
So that's what we need to do.
Yes, that's where it ends. That's where it's going. In the meantime, I'll be right with you, Bindu. In the meantime, you know, it's like you're searching your house for your cell phone. When you find it, you realize it was in your back pocket the whole time. So that's the metaphor that's used. So we're out there looking for God because we're looking through our senses to find him. But it's God herself that's looking through the senses to find herself. So she's getting all kinds of clues because everything is her, but the mind presents it as individual objects. So she's finding attractions and aversions through all of these things and going after some and leaving others behind. But what the oneness, the wholeness that she's searching for is on the other side of the senses, behind the senses, not in front of the senses. And so we spend our life going into the senses, looking for ourselves. Like there's a wonderful YouTube video of two soccer teams playing soccer, but all of them have these binoculars fastened to their heads. So they're all trying to play soccer with each other, looking through binoculars. And so you can see them trying to go find the ball when the ball is literally right there on the ground in front of them, but they can't find it where it is because everything is distorted. Nothing is in its proper relation to them, so they can't play their game. That's what we're doing. We've put on the goggles of the senses. We've put on the goggle of the senses with the lens of the mind, and we're running around trying to play soccer with God, and we're fumbling all over the place because everything is distorted. Nothing is where it should be. This world does not make sense. There are unanswerables here all the time. So the scriptures say, dude, take the glasses off. Stop going out through the senses. Stop going to the mind for all of your references. Just sit down, be still, and know that I am God. It's like, stop looking and begin seeing. Stop searching and see. And so that's what our practice is. Our practice is sitting there and seeing God, taking off everything that gets in the way, using the mantra to slow the mind, using our breathing to bring our awareness to the moment, to the present, sitting straight up and down in a proper posture so that we can forget the body, so that we can go beyond the body. So all of these practices are trying to get us to take off our big fat set of glasses so that we can see what is and not what we expect, which is what's going on. Bindu?
Yes, Maharaj. So, sorry, with everything going on, I'm joined in so late. So I can totally understand, turning the mind around or transcending, or as one gets aware after finishing an activity. So let's say you're making dinner and you're having dinner and you finish it, and then you sit down and they say, okay, now you have a moment, and I can understand, that you can turn it around and remember that it is the awareness only, and feel it. But when most of the day is occupied with outgoing activity, which needs to get done, I guess I find it hard to see that awareness during the activity or in the activity. And I think that's why if the whole day is full of activity, and that's why I think Nisargadatta Maharaj and they all say that you have to simplify your life and slow down and stop. But is there a trick to seeing the Brahman outside? Why?
Yes. And that trick is outlined in the 4 yogas. But you can help it along. There are things that you can do that will lead you there. One of them is, and I've got this thing in my mind, this image, and I think I've shared it before. When I was in, I think it was 9th, maybe 10th grade, probably 10th grade, I went to see Alien when it came out at the movies, and I can't go to horror movies. I can't.
No, I can't either.
Because it literally, I get so hypnotized by them, so drawn in, that I'm terrified beyond words. And so I went with this friend of mine, and I was sitting there. We had gotten these big buckets of popcorn, and I had ended up, dumping out my popcorn so that I could hold that box up over the front of my face anytime the music told me something's about to happen. I would put that box up over my head. Well, Alien was enough of a terrifying movie that wasn't enough. So I got up out of my chair and was standing over by the wall. And at that theater had these big curtains coming down all around the room, all around on the walls. And I was pulling those curtains over my face anytime. Well, that wasn't even good enough. I was still terrified. So I went back and stood by the theater door, and I would just step out of the theater and close the door, and I'd be out there with the sound of the popcorn machines and the arcade machines and the people running around and stuff. And it would completely break the illusion of the movie. And then I could open the door, go back into the silence and darkness of the movie, and I'd get caught up in it again. And then I'd have to go out and breathe again. Those are the tricks that we can do for this world. It's like one, know that the beloved is with you while you're making pancakes and while you're paying your bills, and try and come up with little popcorn buckets that will remind you that the Lord is with you, however you want to do it. One of the things I did was I had two outboxes in my desk. One was to Takor or to God as my offering. And the second one was the outbox that went to the next person in the office for whatever it was. And so anytime I finished a task, I'd put it in God's box as my offering. And then, after a few minutes, I'd take it out of there and put it in the outbox. But that would help me to remember that everything is an offering, And so you come up with your own tricks to help you keep your mind aware that you're dreaming. That's all you have to do. Just come up with as many tricks as you can do. And Indian culture is full of those tricks. All of your kitchen rules, all of your food rules, all of the clothing rules, all of those rules were thought up by the sages for that one purpose. Of course, many people growing up in that culture have begun to believe that they're there for their own sake, that it actually is important not to have your shoes on in the kitchen, or that it actually is important, to not touch this with that or the other. The point is, God gives you all of those things, so at no point during the day, can you forget that God is everywhere present, that everything is sacred. And so all of those numerous rules of culture, in a healthy culture, in Indian culture in particular, is there for that reason. And so, you come up with your own things. I did the praying every hour on the hour when I was at work, that I mentioned. I did the thing where I always started my mantra when my right foot hit the ground whenever I went for walks. So you just do these things that will bring your mind back to the reality, to remember I'm watching a movie, or to remember I'm dreaming. This is not real. These days I'm not doing long meditations. I'm doing multiple very short ones during the day, where when I feel myself or sense that I've been pulled out, I'll sit down and breathe and go through that whole process of gathering my awareness again, bringing it inside. And I go through my affirmations. I'm ever free. I'm ever beloved of God. I am blissful. I'm immortal. I've never been born. I've never died. And I sit there and I just sit with those things for a few minutes, go out into the lobby, become aware of all of these things again, remind myself, bring them back to the front of my mind. And then I go back into the theater and hope they last as long as they can. But when they start to weaken and I start getting caught up in the movie again, I go back to that door and I go back out there into the lobby, and I kind of breathe, bring myself back into what's real and what's not real, get myself centered, and then I go back in again. And so that's the only trick. The other trick, I guess there is another, that's the only trick. And the other trick is a typical Vedanta lecture. There's only one trick. And the second one is to know that all of this is already true. That your realization is already there, that God's grace is in fact enough, it seems like it's a matter of time, but time has no reality to God. He doesn't care about it at all. It has no real existence. And so just don't sweat, because none of the problems that you have are real.
Yes.
And so just let go of them. Give yourself permission not to mourn the problems, and to smile heartily at the joke you're pulling on yourself. What a great riddle you've put together that you're not able to get out of it yourself, and just keep it in that perspective. There's no big deals, as big and crazy as they look, whether they're wars or concentration camps or vacations on the beach. They're all equally unreal. You've never been at any of them. They're only showing in your mind. They're only being observed by you. You can't touch them and they can't touch you. They don't have that kind of reality. The only thing with that substance is your beloved. And that's why the scriptures say, Only God is your very own. He's the only thing you can actually touch, that can actually touch you in this world. Everything else can touch your body, can touch, maybe can touch your mind, maybe get into your mind, but nothing can touch the self, the soul. That's the reason that we can't be fulfilled in this world, because we can't actually pick anything up here. The body can pick it up, the dream body can pick it up, and the dream world can contain it. But we are not that. We are the sleeper in the bed. And as much as we eat in the dream, we're not going to get full. With as many friends as we have in the dream, we're not going to take care of our loneliness. We are not this. And so what tricks? There's multitudes of them.
Yes.
But all of them are to remind us of the same thing. You are free. You are blissful. Your love is infinite. That there is nothing needed. You are self-contained and eternal. And you have to at some point, and you will at some point, give yourself permission to believe that, to know that. Until then, my trick is to keep laughing. Just keep laughing. Like, this is crazy. This is such a ride. Such a ride. Yes, Priya.
I was going to say something about what you had said earlier, like in a couple of videos before. You used to say like praying before we started our day, just for a couple minutes, and like praying to God to, like before doing your job or anything you would go out before, would kind of help, like kind of say thank you for, using me as a vessel to do the job. And that way it's not you doing it, it's like through God, kind of would kind of set you up for that too. Sometimes I know, like, I don't know if this is helpful or not for anybody, but sometimes even we're on our phone all the time sometimes. And if you're having like a busy schedule, I put reminders on the phone to kind of go off, like either before, like right before or after your stuff. Like you can have little reminders saying things to you, so it'll actually alarm and you'll look at it before you go in. So it kind of always keeps it in your mind too, to like, oh yeah, there's not, you could either be thinking of God before you're doing anything. It's kind of like a constant. You can go off every 10 minutes and go off right before every single thing that you're doing. So it's kind of constant too. I mean,
Yeah.
we're at our phones, honestly. So you can put sticky notes on everybody or everything or whatever. You can come up with all kinds of stuff, honestly.
Yeah. You can put a Christmas wreath. You can put a Christmas wreath on your wall.
Yeah, see, there's
in May, to
I mean,
remind yourself that God is always present. Christmas is every day.
every day. There's all kinds. See, there's just all kinds.
Yes.
No, perfect.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely true.
Yes.
Absolutely true.
Yes.
Whatever you can do. There was someone, I think it was Lalita. She had an app on her phone. It's the one you can get, that you can set the frequency, but whatever frequency you set, it will tell you you're going to die. It says you're going to die, and then it gives you a verse of encouragement or something from some scripture or a song. It's non-denominational, non-religious specific, but it will give you some piece of wisdom after it reminds you that you're going to die. So because Vivekananda, he tells monks in particular, he says it's good for a monk to think about death every day, which is why in the old Shakespeare plays, the monks always have a skull sitting on their desk. That's why that's so common, because they would actually keep a skull sitting on the desk to remind them of their mortality, of the fact that all of this is temporary and it's all going to come to an end, because that will help you to remember what's important. It will help you to separate from the ever changing, and to remember that which doesn't change, that which is ever present within us. And so, there's a good one for you. You can take a skull to work and put it on your desk.
Yeah, especially with kids with challenges.
Yeah.
But
Look
yeah,
at your hands.
yeah.
Just look
Go
at
ahead.
your hands and say mother's hands. Start with your hands. Just say these are mother's hands. And
Yes.
and just that love, and you start with those hands in the temple and watch her work. And you know who loves her. It's the Father.
Yeah.
So, and you're the child in between. You're all of it. And just watch her move.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice. Mhm.
Remember that there is no you, there is no ego you here. Mother is inhabiting you and playing like the game of life through you. Your ego is just that condensate that happens, that chemical reaction that happens when mother takes on a mind and a body to play the game. An ego gets born, and that ego takes on an identity separate from the mother. But in fact, you are the mother playing the game of Nicole, playing the game of Elizabeth, or playing the game of Swami C. It's just that one of the problems of that game is that it spins off this chemical reaction that makes you think you exist separate from mother who's playing the part. She does such a good job, you begin to be convinced that you, the costume, are real, and that mother, the actress, isn't, or is somewhere else. So this is the game as we play it. But there's those sub things that we have to stop. But there are those things that we should always remember in the game. One, God is everywhere present and always perfect. Don't forget that. Always repeat that. The second thing is that all things are working together for your good. So no matter how badly they seem to be to you at the moment, understand that there is an unfathomable love behind them that is actually giving you blessing through the pain or through the struggle or through the suffering. And hold on to that. Everything is a love letter from the divine. Don't throw it out if you disagree with it. Just put it on the table and come back to it again and again until you see it, until you understand it. And ask Mother, please let me see the love in this experience, or the love in this condition, or the love in whatever it is. And to teach us, how to use and interpret our life as a love letter and not as a distraction. So to know that all things work together for good, that God is everywhere present and always perfect, and that you are free. You are free, and that your nature is love, wisdom, and existence. And all three of those things, any experience you have of any of those three things, is your guarantee of your intimacy with the beloved. If God separated even a micro hair from you, you would cease to exist, because God is your existence. Your love, your ability to see love and to express love, is because you are borrowing God's presence. God's presence in you allows you to see love and to feel love and to give love. And your wisdom, your ability to learn, your ability to grow, is grace. It is Mother allowing you out of your previous bondage into a new state, into a higher state of knowing. So the fact that you can change is your guarantee of God's grace, that God's grace is on you. You're not circling. You're not stuck. Mother's grace is upon you. So just remind yourself of those things as many times as you can in a day until you don't need to anymore, until it's become a part of your awareness, a part of your expression. And I guess that's how we get there, if there's any getting there, because that's the funny thing. We're already there. It's just a matter of recognizing it, realizing it. So, all right.
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you.
Yes. Jaima. Be well.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Swami.
Mhm.
Thank you,
everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Yeah.
Thank
Bye.
you, Maharaj.
Mhm.
Yes, indeed. Jaima.
Yeah. Jim.
Hello, Ganga. I didn't get to say hi to you. Good night.